Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another episode of the All In Show here on the Clemson Voice of College Football YouTube channel. I am your host, Jordan Bowman. A little bit of a special show going on tonight. My regular co-host, Tiger Paw Craven, he had a scheduling conflict. He's a softball dad, and with all the weather and all that, it kind of created some schedule delays. And so he's currently at a softball game right now, but he does plan on dropping in at some point. So he'll be in at some point. But I thought for today it would be a good idea, just because of all of that, to kind of just give the show to you guys. I'm feeling kind of I feel like this will be a good day to kind of do a mailbag, listener questions, whatever type of show, since it's not going to be one of our normal shows. I'm feeling better, by the way. As you guys know, if you guys watched the last episode, I was dealing with COVID. Feel a lot better, just dealing with a lot of congestion now. But I'm ready to chop it up with y'all. Ready to go a good bit. So, I mean, go ahead while you guys are, just kind of getting in here and people trickling in. Get your questions in. We're going to talk a lot. A lot of news has happened in the last week, particularly on the Clemson front, as far as future conference realignment, the lawsuit with the ACC. Of course, last weekend you also got your big time commitment for the 2026 recruiting class. You got your quarterback in Tate Reynolds. So feel free to ask me any recruiting questions, anything like that. Also the college football game is coming out, and that's kind of what I've been excited for. I pre-ordered it. I got the deluxe edition. I ended up getting the bundle with Madden. I typically am one of those people that, I crap on Madden any chance I get, but you get two deluxe versions of a AAA title for $150 is kind of hard to pass up. So I get to play that at some point Monday when I get the early access. So let me know what you guys are excited about, and let me know if you guys got the game as well. It's been too long, man. The college football has needed a college football game for a really long time. Let's see what you guys are talking about in the comment section. Let me give a quick shout out. We got Jackson Johnson in here. What's up, Clemson Tiger Nation? Jackson, as always, is a great supporter of this show. One of our moderators, does a lot on the promotion front on social media. And keep doing your thing, man. He also runs a channel of his own and a show of his own called The Jacksonian. So you guys feel free to check him out when you get the chance. John Sarian, another one of our regulars and another one of our original moderators. He says, boy, these Fridays in the summer are tough to make. Yeah. Friday was just kind of one of those days where it made the most sense. Obviously, today notwithstanding for both me and Tiger Paw Craven from a scheduling standpoint, but we are going to try to keep it at this date and, for a good while. And we'll let you know if there's anything that changes. Cade Klubnik enthusiast, he says, hey, what's up, man? Good to see you. Another one of our regulars. Chase is here. He says, what is up? He says, we need some good news soon. Wilfred Anderson Young. Yeah, I'll be sure to talk about that and hit on that. And you guys feel free to ask me any questions you have about recruiting. But I do have a lot of reason to believe that things are going to pick back up a little bit here in the near future. Eric is in here. He says, go Tigers. Good to see you, man. Go Tigers. Adam is here. He says, how's it going? Joe Long is here. Yo, ma. Ben is here. He says, howdy. Alex, he says, might sound, well, okay, I'll answer this question later. But he has a question about quarterback development. I'll be sure to hit on that as well. I want to make sure I didn't miss on anybody. Hip Elf, he says, on paper, we get more talent than Michigan does at offensive linemen. That actually be something to dive into, but you're probably not wrong, especially when you consider The star talent currently on the roster is pretty good. It's the best it's been, at least um, as a stars standpoint is concerned. But you know, there's a reason that offensive line is a developmental position. So you gotta, I mean, you have to be able to develop them when you get them. So, all right. But before I answer any real questions, if you haven't already, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I do see some new faces here. Maybe not new viewers, but new chatters. So if any of you guys are new to the channel, uh, I'm usually not running this show solo. I do have a co-host, Tiger Paw Craven, and we typically do this every Friday at 5:30 Eastern time. So if you like what you hear, uh, feel free to subscribe and hit the like button because it really does help the channel out as well. Oh, and for this sort of mailbag portion, it's going to be the same as we typically do. I'm going to read as many comments as I possibly can. And we'll certainly have a lot more time to read comments this go around. But if you want to make sure it's read, then the super chat feature is available. Those come, those get to the front of the line. So if you feel so generous, that's an option as well. All right, let's kind of dive on in. Tired of wasting time. I'll start with Cade Klubnik enthusiast. He asked, "Does Tate Reynolds committing mean we won't be getting DJ Bordeaux?" Of course, DJ Bordeaux is a state of Georgia quarterback that Clemson has, been in talks with, has had contact with. He's camped here before. I wouldn't say no. I mean, I think you keep those lines of communication open. Clemson does not plan on taking two quarterbacks in the 2026 cycle. Of course, they offered Tate Reynolds and also Brady Hart, but they were only going to plan on taking one of them, and that was kind of the messaging that both were given. Of course, Brady Hart ended up committing to Michigan, and but Tate Reynolds was the first offer. Was the guy that Garrett Riley really was impressed by at the Dabo Swinney camp. He's their guy. So, I think if something were to change on that front and Tate Reynolds decides, maybe to open back up his recruitment, we'll see. I mean, Clemson always, if you're a smart recruiting staff, you're going to keep lines of communication open, even if you already have your numbers at at that particular position. So you want to be able to have, a fallback option, especially since the other kid you offered is committed elsewhere already. And I really do like DJ a lot. I really like his tape. I know he's kind of been a popular guy within the fan base and kind of somebody that people have been hoping Clemson would pursue a little bit more. But Garrett Riley really likes what he has in Tate Reynolds, and he kind of fits the mold of what they kind of are looking for as far as the future of this offense. He's a well-built kid, has a really live arm, and he kind of fits kind of that stockier, more well-built, but can run type of archetype at quarterback. So that's kind of the deal there. Alex asks, he says, might sound dumb, but do you think Taj Boyd has something to do with our quarterback development? I mean, Taj Boyd is he's an assistant, and he certainly does get involved with the quarterbacks. I wouldn't say that, like, I'm not sure what you mean by, like, does he have something to do with our quarterback development as far as the lack of quarterback development, or does he not have enough of a role? Excuse me. So you can feel free to elaborate, but I mean, Taj is there, he's involved, and I've heard nothing but great things about him from people that are in the know. So, excuse me, still dealing with the cough. That's the beautiful thing about COVID is it, even once you're done, it still kind of lingers a little bit after the 5 days. All right, let's see. Jackson says, I'm waiting and seeing on the reviews of NCAA 25. Plus, I am not going broke over a PS5. Yeah, I mean, if you don't already have a console, it probably doesn't make sense to, buy it just for that. I mean, you probably need to, have some other games that you're interested in playing. I mean, they do have a smaller, like, it's a smaller storage. I think I forgot what it's called. They have it for both PlayStation and Xbox, but they always have the digital only PlayStation. So it doesn't have a disc tray or a disc compartment where you can put in a disc, and the storage space is smaller and it costs less money. But even still, that's a lot of money. Those are still like $400. So I totally get you there. If you didn't already have a console, I mean, it's kind of up to you if it's worth it. But I knew I had to jump on this. I don't have much time for gaming, nowadays, the joys of being an adult. But I knew that was a game that, that was something I didn't want to miss. So I'm excited. I think the people get it, the people who pre-ordered get it on Monday, which is July 15th, and they get it at 4, I believe, Eastern Standard Time is when it releases. I don't know why they didn't just release it at midnight. Like, I mean, it's summer. It's not like anybody has school. I don't really get the point of, making people wait. But hey, I'll be at work, and it'll probably auto download while before I get home. So I'll still be able to play it. John says, them dogs are racking up the misdemeanor arrests down there in Athens. What's the chance they have guys out for the Chick-fil-A kickoff? I'm going with 0%. LOL. Yeah, I did hear about that. It at a certain point, it's like, well, you can't even really. It's not even funny anymore, just because it really is. I mean, when you lose the lives of 2 young people, and it still is going on. I mean, you have to wonder what's going on, why the message isn't being felt, there. I mean, you would think after that, I'm not saying it would put a stop to it completely, because racing, I think, is just something that's gotten popular in general lately. But in Georgia's not the only school that's dealing with it, but obviously they have a very unique problem there. And I think the only way to kind of curb it is to take playing time. But I don't know. We'll see how Kirby decides to do that, especially, since one of the guys that got arrested earlier this week that was reported on yesterday, is one of their starting linebackers, Smile Munden. So, I don't know. Yeah, I guess we'll kind of find out. Trevor Etienne just had his reckless driving charges. I don't know. Was it a DUI? Was it reckless drive? I can't remember the exact charge, but he just had him dropped. So, I mean, I think between Smile Munden and the other kid's name, Bo Hewley, they said that their bond came out to like $26 combined. It just, you're like kind of like, all right, well, this is probably not gonna, not much is probably gonna come out of this. You just kind of have a feeling. All right. Hip Elf, back to his comment. He said, on paper, we get more talent than Michigan does at offensive linemen. And yeah, that's definitely something I'd like to look at. You're probably right, especially if you look at, Clemson and Michigan from a recruiting standpoint over the last 3 or 4 cycles. I mean, Clemson has gotten its fair share of blue chippers on the offensive line, but the difference is one, Michigan plugged holes in the transfer portal. That's just the reality. They've done it. They did it both times. Well, the last couple of off seasons. When they got Oluwatimi, one of the rare few guys that actually was able to get a Clemson offer out of the transfer portal. He ends up going to Michigan, and he starts for them on a on their playoff team in 2022, I believe, or 2021. I'm having a brain fart. I believe it was. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was 2020 when they played. I think they played Georgia. That was, I think it was the year they played Georgia. So I think that was 2021. But yeah, and then they also got a kid from Arizona State who I don't think who Clemson was in contact with. I don't think that they ever actually offered. Ladarius Henderson. That's another guy off the top of my head that I remember them getting on the offensive line. So one, they did that, and also, Sharon Moore is one of the best offensive line coaches in the country, and he was also their offensive coordinator. That's kind of the difference. And Michigan put guys in the league, and they've been putting guys in the league at that position. And so, that's why you bring in a guy like Matt Luke. You're trying to curb and change that trend. You've had I believe 6 offensive linemen drafted in the last. I'm sorry, I believe I don't even think it's 6. I believe like 4 it's either 4 or 6 offensive linemen drafted in the last 10 drafts. I made a tweet about it earlier this week, but I'm blanking on the exact number. The point is, it's not been good. It's not been good, and that's kind of something that pretty much every Clemson fan has realized or has been known for a while. And when you gripe about the misses this cycle and in past cycles at the top targets for your offensive linemen, I mean, it's easy to jump all over the NIL boogeyman, which has been the boogeyman for a lot of other fan bases, and say we're just not paying as much as everybody. But the reality is Clemson has had a serious problem with offensive line development for a really long time, and that's something that if I'm an opposing a recruiting staff, that's really all I need to show. I mean, it's like, oh, you're considering Clemson? I mean, that's cool. I mean, I hear good things about them, but I mean, who have they put in the league at your position? I mean, if I'm a 16, 17-year-old offensive tackle, top 50 kid, I look at the guys that went to Clemson and I'm like, ooh, I don't know. I mean, what they're high? They don't have any first round picks. No first round picks at offensive line. Their highest pick was a second rounder, and they haven't had any other guys go before day 3 in over a decade. I mean, that's all the pitch I would need if I were an opposing staff recruiting against Clemson. That's all I would need to say. I don't even need to discuss money. So I mean, I do think that that's the goal, and that's the hope, with bringing in Matt Luke, a guy who has developed at offensive line and recruited at a high level at offensive line for a really long time. I mean, it's not going to be an overnight fix, but that's why a really good product on the field this season can go a long way towards, getting better returns in the 2026 recruiting class. So, yeah. Jay, most pressing question of the offseason. How was oh man, okay, I don't want to slander my guy. I don't want to say my guy. I don't know the guy. I don't know him personally, but yeah, you're referencing Austin and the crystal balls. Yeah. I mean, they haven't gone our way the past month or so. And I don't want to throw dirt on the guy, but obviously that's been something that's not been fun to watch for sure. Keep chopping. He asks, hearing any Big 12 whispers? Well, I mean, I haven't been hearing any whispers. I've been hearing like shouts from the mountaintop all over social media. So, I'm not going to pretend to have like any sort of insider knowledge on that kind of stuff and how that whole thing is playing out. And I can't corroborate. I know there have been reports about Clemson and Florida State being in talks with Big 12 representatives. I can't say that, how much truth there is to that. But, I do think there is a reality where, that ends up being the direction if the Big 12 can put together a sort of lucrative, package for Clemson and Florida State. I mean, I don't think Clemson and Florida State are leaving the ACC to, take the same money essentially the same money they were making in the ACC. There's got to be some sort of, whether it's an unequal revenue share. I mean, they were talking about, private equity. I can't tell you that I know fully how that works, but the private equity would allow them to give Clemson and Florida State a larger share. I don't know. We'll kind of see how that goes. My guy Will is in the chat. Good to see you. One of our resident Notre Dame fans, and a great friend of the show, has been on here. Good to see you. Ben asks, thoughts on Bryce Davis's commitment on July 20th? Yes, that is coming up in 8 days. I'm sure that, if you follow recruiting or follow the sites and all of that, you've probably seen there's been a wave of predictions for Bryce Davis to Clemson. I really do think that, they're in a good spot. I don't think it's over. I don't think Bryce has completely made his decision yet. But the way things are trending, Clemson is in a good position to land his commitment on the 20th. Like I've said in previous shows, it's easy to freak out about, some of the misses and kind of the lack of momentum that came out of the official visit weekend. But you still have a really good chance to finish this summer strong with, commitments from some really high profile guys that you are in it for, like Bryce Davis, like Jordan Young, Dylan Alfred, Logan Anderson. You do have a chance to put kind of a bow on this summer cycle, and we'll kind of see how they expand the board as far as the offensive line is concerned heading into the season. So, yeah, I mean, getting Bryce Davis would put a bow on your defensive line class. It'd be massive. It'd be a nice recruiting win over Georgia. All of that. It would be a really big deal. He's a really talented player, really good kid, and just kind of he screams Clemson kid to me, kind of like Jordan Young, maybe not to the same degree, but I think he would fit in great in this class and would be another top 50 kid to add to your defensive line haul. Thank you, Joe, for reminding the people. He says likes. Don't forget. Absolutely. Yes. Please hit that like button. If you are new, just joining, that's a really easy way to help the channel, help the show. So feel free to do that. Jackson Johnson says, I think Clemson should be on Clemson, South Carolina should be on Black Friday instead of Georgia Tech, because right now I don't see Clemson, South Carolina beating Ohio State, Michigan, Bama, Auburn, Texas A&M in the ratings. What do you think, Jordan? Yeah, I don't think that from a ratings perspective, like when I think about that whole issue, I don't think I really see it from a eyeballs perspective. I'm more of a traditionalist, especially when it comes to rivalry games. And I think Clemson, South Carolina belongs on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And that should be the way it is. I think what the ACC was willing to concede was not enough, I think, to really make that sacrifice. I can't get behind that, but maybe some other people feel differently. Cade Klubnik enthusiast asks, says he can't wait to give Maffa 40 carries a game. I can't say that if Maffa gets 40 carries a game, we either have the most dominant offensive line in college football, or the receivers are just not it, or or everybody's injured. Because I don't think there's ever a scenario where Garrett Riley wants to run the ball 40 times. Now, he is a guy that, he wants to be balanced and he wants to be multifaceted. But, if something's working, he's not going to necessarily – I do think he's a guy that will go to something until it stops working. So if there is a game where, Maffa is just – the offensive line is really blocking up front, Maffa is seeing it well, and they can't really do much. They're having trouble tackling him, maybe. But, you really ideally don't want to give your running back 40 carries a game, especially when you don't really have the established depth behind him to be like, okay, we can put this guy in case. I mean, Keith Adams Jr. is a guy that's been in the program a long time, but he hasn't had a whole lot of, big time snaps. And I hope that's not what happens. I mean, you want to be able to be a balanced offense and explosive in the passing game as well. That's kind of the idea, but we'll see. More people talking about the Georgia situation. Dabo would be at 5 dismissals by now. Yeah, it certainly is. It's handled a little bit differently. But I can't say I know the details, with Georgia and all of that. But obviously something's not there's something's getting lost in translation, at least. Yeah, Trevor Etienne got a mild slap on the wrist too. I have no doubt Kirby will start him in Atlanta. Well, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised because the charges were dropped, so and now there's not even really. It's like, okay, well, we don't have anything to punish you for because you didn't get charged for anything. Now there's plausible deniability there. So yeah, but that's kind of the reality. Timothy Green asks, so I have a question. What do you think your chances are of getting into the playoffs this year, please? The chances, when you're the second odds favorite to win the ACC, your chances are, relatively pretty good. I do think this team is good enough to, I think on paper this team is a playoff team, but reality is you can't afford to be what you were offensively last year by any stretch of the means. You have to find a way to create explosive plays in the passing game, and you have to be able to take care of the football. You do those two things. I think you have this. I think you have the running backs. I think you have the wide receivers. I really do think you have the wide receivers. I'm talked about ad nauseum about how much I like this group this year. But you have to see it. It's been a position of flux for the last 3 seasons, whether it was injuries or guys not playing up to their, what they were expected to be. And so, it is a big prove it year. But I think you have the guys this year from a depth perspective, and a talent. I think you've upgraded the talent a little bit, just even without taking a kid out of the transfer portal. So, I do think the room is in the best shape it's been in a long time, but you have to see it on the field. I think this tight end room, Clemson has not been historically a team known for great tight end play or a really deep tight end room. You can think of a couple of guys. You have your Jordan Leggett's and your Dwayne Allens, but Davis Allen was a guy that I thought was underutilized while he was here. You had some other guys that just didn't pan out. But I think this year, I mean, you bring back Jake Briningstool for his senior season. I, I I think he's going to be a big time weapon for Cade in the passing game. You see Josh Sapp coming on, Olson Pat Henry. You bring in Christian Bentiker out of the high school ranks, who I think has the potential to be one of the best tight ends in school history when it's all said and done. I mean, I think the makings of a great offense are all there right now. And you know how I feel about the defense. I think the defense is uber talented, and I think Wes Goodwin has only grown as a coordinator. Uh, so I mean, this team is a playoff team on paper, but it really is. What is the progression of Cade Klubnik, and also, just can you get consistent play out of your offensive line and help? Can your offensive line stay healthy? Can you get a capable starting five? You bring back 4 or 5 starters, and can you build the depth behind them? And can you get better play out of some of the guys that maybe underperformed last year? And can you get play from guys who dealt with injury last year? Walker Parks and Marcus Tate were certainly guys that fall in that category. And then, Blake Miller is a guy that played every game, but obviously he didn't live up to the expectations that he set from his freshman year. So, I think the makings are all there of a playoff team, and I'm leaning towards that coming to fruition. And if you win the ACC, you're in, and I think this team absolutely can win the ACC. All right. Caleb asks, my guy, how do you think the matchup between Cade and DJ is going to go? Do you think DJ gets his revenge, or Cade proves himself that he was better? I'm not, I don't look at it as a Cade versus DJ type of thing, because despite what people want to believe, like there wasn't any bad blood between Clemson and DJ or anything like that. And they did, the narrative is out there that Clemson pushed DJ out, which wasn't the case. They didn't tell him to transfer. They didn't say he should transfer. That was a decision that he came to with himself and his family. And they felt like that was the best course of action. DJ was going to get an opportunity to win his job back. But ultimately, they felt like things weren't trending in that direction, and he decided to transfer. So, I mean, I think people kind of have built up this revenge narrative and all of that, and kind of a DJ and versus Cade, but it was never really about that. But they're going to make it about that. And I understand why. But I did want to point that out. It is going to it's an interesting matchup, because of that angle, and also because Florida State is, they're coming off of a undefeated regular season, won the ACC, and they are the perceived favorite in the conference, at least from a Vegas standpoint. And Clemson, it kind of, people on the outside see Clemson as the team that's trending down, Florida State as the team that's trending up and retaking their position as the top program in the conference. So, I mean, there definitely is a lot of angles there. I'm not going to give a whole lot of predictions at this point. We'll get to those in a later show. But I do think it's going to be a big time matchup. I do think both teams are I think these are the 2 best teams in the conference as it sits right now. But obviously things can change. You do have Miami out there lurking, and with everything that they're bringing back and what they brought in out of the portal, Mario Cristobal in year 3, a lot of reasons to think, maybe they kind of take that next step. Obviously Louisville is coming off of a great season. We'll see if, there's a kind of a come back down to earth moment, or Jeff Brom keeps that thing rolling. Virginia Tech has gotten a lot of love, and NC State. So, there is there's a lot interesting about the conference race this year, and from a scheduling standpoint, some teams have have it more favorable than others, and of course, you do have the three new additions in the conference as well. So yeah, there's a lot to watch there. But yeah, I'll save the prediction for a later show. I do think it's going to be a massive matchup, and I think it's going to kind of set the stage for how the conference race plays out the rest of the regular season. John S., I think just one good year, 2024, under Luke, and offensive line recruiting changes significantly. What say you? I mean, I tend to agree. I really do think a good product on the field from an offensive line standpoint. I mean, you don't have to be like the Joe Moore Award winner or anything like that, but do you look like a team that's bringing back 4 or 5 starters and a line that has a lot of starts combined under its belt? You see some proof of concept there. I mean, Blake Miller is a guy that has gotten a lot of love in draft circles. If he has a big time year, maybe he goes to the draft and is a day 1 or maybe early day 2 pick. You have something to point to there. You see kind of you kind of see the development. I mean, you can point to that as a recruiting tactic. Like you see, we bring in Matt Luke, and all of a sudden, Clemson's offensive line they look much different. They're getting guys. They get guys drafted. Walker Parks is coming back. He's in a draft year as well. What if he gets drafted? What if Tristan Lay, the former 5-star, what if he kind of puts it all together at left tackle? And then you have all of a sudden you have 3 really high caliber guys that might be, day 1 or day 2 picks. I didn't even mention Marcus Tate, who he's also draft eligible. So, I mean, maybe you don't hope that every single one of those guys leaves, but, because it does put you in an interesting situation for next year. But it would mean a ton from a recruiting standpoint to see, we bring in Matt Luke. It's not a Clemson problem. We brought in Matt Luke and we all of a sudden we're producing well. We're putting a good product on the field, and guys are being developed. Then that's kind of that would change the perception, because last year it just wasn't it. They weren't terrible, despite what some people would think. They weren't terrible, and they weren't terrible, all the time. But it wasn't good enough, especially with when you consider the star talent that you have, and the guys that even when you had injuries, they weren't up to what they probably should have been. So that's kind of the thing that needs to change. And if you have a strong year offensively, that gives you an immediate proof of concept for Matt Luke on the trail, and I think that's really all he needs. Then I think you'll start to see, Matt Luke is good enough to get you in the door for a lot of these kids, and I think that's what we saw this cycle. But as far as closing and ultimately being the choice, that's where you have to have some sort of proof of concept that guys are being developed, guys are getting drafted. And if you do that this year, you have an opportunity to have a really strong data point, really strong early data point. Hip Elf says, man, Ohio State been getting the #1 receiver since Ryan Day took over, now getting the best DB. I picked them winning a national title soon. I mean, they are absolutely loaded. It is a thing where, people have this, they kind of did it. I'm not saying Ryan Day is Kirby Smart, but they did the same thing with Kirby Smart because the fact that he hadn't won a title meant he wasn't going to win a title. Ohio State is a whether we like joking about Ohio State on this channel, but they are a blue blood program. Like they're going to win one. They're going to win another one. They recruit at such a high level, regardless of who the head coach is, really. And they have that gravitas as a program to where they're going to attract the top talent. And all it takes is the right guy and the right staff to kind of put the pieces together. So we'll see if Ryan Day has it, this year. But they do look really good and formidable on paper this year. But they got to get over the Michigan hump, because now that used to be a game that they would pencil in at least over the past 10 or so years, and now you've lost 3 straight. So Michigan's lost a ton from last year, so this feels like a year that you should do it, but games aren't played on paper. Jay says, what do you think Riley's game plan will be for Georgia? That's a good question. I think the reality is I know people are like, okay, well, you're kind of worried about, what if we try to do too much and then we turn the ball over and all of that. But I think the reality is I think Clemson is going to have to, they're going to have to take shots. I mean, you're going to want to run the ball, but I think they have to take shots in this game. They have to make Georgia, respect a downfield passing game, because first and foremost, because if they don't respect that, you're pretty much done. If Georgia's allowed to key in on the run game and the short, the quick passing game, and they can just come down and tackle and play loose, and they don't have to respect, your receivers or Cade pushing the ball downfield, you're going to have a long night offensively. So I do think Riley's going to be aggressive from a passing standpoint. That's me personally. I do think he's going to try to draw up and create some explosives. That's because once you do that, now that opens up a lot of other things. Now Georgia can't put guys in the box, put numbers in the box, and kind of key on Phil Mafah, because he's not a guy that's going to he's not a guy that's just going to be able to find his way out of a loaded box. Like he's not a burner or anything like that. He's going to fight for tough yardage, but Georgia would much rather you get 3 to 4 yards on first down than you hit a 25 plus yard pass downfield. I think that's going to be the biggest difference, because it felt like last year Clemson was trying to, especially later in the year, it's like, okay, let's just try to stay on schedule and stay ahead of the chains. A lot of underneath passes and stuff like that, screens. Not a ton of shots downfield, because they just didn't feel like they had it. I think that can't be the case against Georgia. You're gonna have to force their DBs to play, because I do think they have some talented DBs, but they are very young, and that was something that they had some issues with last year. So yeah, I think first and foremost, make Georgia respect your downfield passing game. Take shots. They may not all be completed. You throw. Ideally, you don't want to throw an interception, but that's kind of the risk that you have to be willing to take, because you cannot, unless all of a sudden Clemson becomes the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line or something, and they can just block Georgia up front. With them teeing off on you, then it's going to be a recipe for disaster. All right. Tiggs, good to see you. Another one of our resident moderators and our regulars. He says, the big question is just how much of a step has Cade taken, and has he greatly improved? And that's what we're going to have to find out. I think he's done the work in the offseason. He's sought out private QB coaching. I think he's taken all the steps. But ultimately you have to see it, and we'll kind of see how things play out and what kind of the vibes are after fall camp. But I do think Cade has the ability, but you can't be as reckless with the football as you were last year, and you can't because and it was the strangest thing because last year he was so reckless with the football, and then at times he was so timid with the football that you were not really sure what you were going to get on any given play. You know, there are times where it's like, dang, you throw it, it's there, throw it. And then other times it's like, oh no, don't. That's not the throw. That's you completely missed this guy. And so I mean, it really is. I mean, about between the ears and just seeing the field, and that's just something he has to be better at. And I think he will be. I mean, I do think he will be better than last year. But as you said, it's how big, because that'll be the difference between, okay, Clemson is, they're not horrible offensively, but they don't scare anybody versus, okay, now they have a real downfield passing game. They are multifaceted. Teams really have to dedicate a lot of time game planning for you, type of thing. Okay, because I think you have the pieces around him to be that. Will says Kirby's Georgia is looking like Urban's Florida. Well, I mean, they don't have any murderers that I know of on the roster, so there's that. I don't think it's gotten to that point yet, but obviously the racing thing is an issue. I mean, it's you're putting other people's lives at risk, and obviously we had to find out the hard way last year. So I hope things change over there just for the good of those players, because I mean nobody wants to see a tragedy like that. Chase says $29 for a DUI. Yeah, I don't know. That is what it is. I don't have any comment. Joel says Clemson's offensive line will overachieve if they stay healthy. Yeah, I mean, and I don't even know if it's overachieve, because I do think that these players were, I mean, especially in your starting five, these were guys that were highly recruited. We'll kind of see how the battle at center ultimately plays out, but these are guys that were all highly recruited. Tristan Lay, former 5-star, Marcus Tate, former top 100 kid. Whether it's Ryan Linthicum or Harris Sewell, they were both highly sought after out of high school, both blue chip prospects. Walker Parks, I think he might be the lowest from a high school ranking of anybody on the list, but he was still a 4-star. Blake Miller, another top 100 kid. I mean, if and not just that they are, and it's not even just their star ranking. They've played a lot of football. 4 out of the 5 guys I mentioned. So it's about playing up to that ability, and that's why you bring in a guy like Matt Luke, because you weren't getting that, unfortunately, out of Thomas Austin. So that you bring in a guy that's done it at a high level at multiple programs and at a national championship program. All right. Chase says the first 8 games, you lost the turnover margin in all 4 losses. Only one was a beatdown. The last 5 wins, they won the turnover margin. Correct. This team has the tools to be elite. Just stop playing like a JV team. I mean, I think you were spot on, Chase. I mean, that really is the reality. I mean, this team, last year should have been a lot better than they were, and in a lot of ways, they were a lot better than what their record ended up being. But That's the route. I've never seen a team lose games the way that team did last year. It was such a mind-boggling thing to process in real time. I've never seen anything like that. So it really is, just cleaning up the little stuff. And even with Cade's struggles, you could have easily been a 10-win team last year if you had just not been as erratic from a play-to-play basis. It was crazy. I mean, and every single mistake that you made was like the absolute worst possible mistake you could have made. Instead of like you take a sack and you get behind the chains, it's a sack and a fumble that the other team takes for 6. Instead of you punching it in the end zone, from the 2 or 3 yard line, you fumble and the other team takes it back for 6. You throw interceptions in the end zone, you miss field goals, just things that completely flip your chances from a win probability standpoint. The absolute worst possible outcomes from a win probability standpoint, those were the things that happen so often in those losses. And so you remove even half of those, and we could be talking a little bit differently about that team from a record standpoint. Maybe you still don't win the ACC. Florida State was really good, but maybe you don't absolutely collapse in the fourth quarter against Miami. If you punch it in the end zone against NC State, you don't give up a tip pick 6 that they like. There are so many things that you talk about, and I know you can play that game with a lot of different teams, but it really was magnified for Clemson in a lot of ways because of when they happened and what the end result was. I mean, sometimes he's like, wow. I mean, it would have been better just to take a sack or turn it over on downs than to have that happen. So that's one of the things that needs to change the most. Jay says, if Cade is even a good game manager, Clemson wins double-digit games. I mean, I agree. I mean, I don't think you need Cade to be a superstar. I think that's one of the things that some people are kind of holding him to. I do think Cade has all the potential to be one of the better quarterbacks in the country. But at the end of the day, I do think you have the pieces around him where if he's smart with the football and he's on time with his decision making, then you'll have a pretty good offense and a really, really strong defense to complement it. And you win double-digit games and you're right there in the ACC hunt, and of course, the playoff. Now, if we want to, if we're talking national championship, contender, like not just playoff contender, but legitimate national championship contender, obviously, yeah, you need Cade to be a little bit more than that. But I think I don't think this season will be judged by whether or not Clemson obviously wins a national championship. I mean, I don't think that's what this team is. But I do think this team, getting back the ACC first and foremost would be great, because I think that obviously parlays into a playoff appearance, and then it gives you something to build on for 2025, which I think if you play your cards right and you get the right pieces back, could be a chance to have a special run. But 2024, it's about getting back to more of what we came to be used to from Clemson football, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Caleb asks, going back on Jake, I believe he's talking about Jake Brenningstool. Do you think he can have the same impact that Jordan Leggett did in our 2016 championship team run? Well, like I said, I don't think this team is a national championship contender, but I do think he can be that, and I think he can be more than that, if we're being honest. I mean, I don't have Jordan Leggett's stats in front of me, but I think he had How many yards did he have that season? Maybe 500, 600. Maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was closer to 700. But regardless, which is a really good year. I mean, you're a tight end. You're not going to be one of the primary pass catchers all the time. But I think Jake Brenningstool can be more than that. I mean, I think you saw at multiple points last season what he's capable of. When the offense is humming, when Cade is on time, and when he's, giving his pass catchers a chance. I think Jake is one of the, he could be one of the best playmakers on the team, and he can give you a lot there. So, I do think I'm super high on what Jake can be this year. So yeah, I mean, I think he could be more from a production standpoint than Jordan Leggett was, but depends on Cade, depends on the rest of the offense. Because I mean, he can't, Jake can't throw the ball to himself. Let's see. Chase says Pearman would be a perfect game manager. I mean, he really does have all the he plays like a game manager in a good way, but he is extremely smart with the football, and he understands. Just watching him, I mean, he has a very clear command of the offense, but obviously he doesn't have the athleticism or the arm talent, near the arm talent that Cade Klubnik gives you. So, I mean, if you could give those traits to Cade, then all of a sudden Clemson is absolutely a playoff contender, and they play up to their potential. So, I mean, it really is about Cade getting to that level, because ultimately, I don't think Trent Pearman will be the long-term answer, but he would be a great. I mean, if you're in a pickle and you need a guy, I mean, I'm happy to have Trent Pearman this year for sure, because he could be a balancing force if things go wrong. Let's see. Jay says, I'm hoping I can actually look at Clemson games this year and not have to Google the roster to see who's at wide receiver. Yeah, I mean, that's been another thing, hasn't it? I mean, you haven't had consistency, not just from a on the field play standpoint, but from an availability standpoint. And I don't think it'll ever be as bad as 2021 was, but you had the same issues in 2022 and 2023, and so it's just to a lesser degree. It would have been great for Cade to go through his first year starting with a healthy Antonio Williams, who I think people have kind of forgotten about because he just wasn't available a lot of last year. But he really is one of your best playmakers, and not having him last year was pretty detrimental in retrospect. And I'm really excited to see what he looks like as a junior, because I do think that he's one of those guys that he's a difference maker, and he just he really understands just what it takes to be great. I mean, he works hard at his craft every single day, and I think he showed that the moment he stepped on campus. And it's going to be big for Cade in this offense to have him at 100%. Caleb asked, do you think we take a step in a new direction for a head coach if we don't make the playoffs this year? No, I don't think that's on the table. I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I think the goal this year should be playoff, but ACC championship and a playoff. But if you don't, it depends. First of all, it depends on why you didn't make it, because there are a lot of reasons why this team, potentially doesn't make it. But regardless, no, I don't think that would be the answer, especially with the talent you still have on the roster, with the recruiting class that you're going to have coming in. I think that's not the answer, and I'm not looking that far out anyway because obviously we still have a season to play. But no, I don't. I'm not particularly worried about Clemson going in a different direction. No, Dabo is safe, barring some sort of off the field scandal, which I don't anticipate. Let's see. Jay says, I think what FSU wants to do this year on offense plays into our strengths on defense. I mean, I tend to agree in a lot of ways. I expect Mike Norvell to have a pretty productive offense. I mean, he does a good job of scheming to his personnel. He did that. He had to do that, his first couple of seasons because that roster was terrible, especially from a skill position standpoint. And the offensive line wasn't particularly good either. But obviously he's gotten it to a point where they have really capable weapons. But they did lose a lot from last year. And so it really is about catering that offense to DJ's strengths. And that starts with having a complementary run game. I don't think DJ, at this point, DJ is what he is. He needs a complementary run game, and you have to, you don't want him throwing, 30 plus times a game if you can avoid it. If you can stay ahead of the chains, run the football well, give him, play action opportunities where he can just push the ball downfield because he has a really strong arm. I mean, that's what Oregon State did with him last year. Then, he has a chance to be a pretty solid quarterback for them. But I do think that in a lot of respects does play into what Clemson wants to be defensively. And I do think they'll have, some opportunities to be successful there, especially since, just the familiarity is there. Wes Goodwin is a guy that, of anybody would know DJ's strengths and weaknesses. So, and I think he's only gotten better each year. He's been the defensive coordinator. So we'll see. I think, again, the game is, these games aren't played on paper, and I'm not making any predictions, this far out yet. But I do, as things stand right now, I do like how Clemson's defense matches up, especially if Florida State can't find a true option, a downfield option at receiver, because I do have some questions there about who that actually is going to be. Intelligent Savage, he says both agent zeros on both sides of the ball. Barrett Carter and Antonio Williams with Cade Klubnik must be the main glue to move to ship downstream. Offensive line and Maffa have to put in that work as well. Go Tigers! Absolutely. I mean, bringing back Barrett Carter, he's the heart of this defense. Getting him back was absolutely massive. For the linebacker room, for the defense as a whole, and I mean he is the face of that defense. And so, I expect him to truly step into that leadership role now too, especially with, Jeremiah Trotter, leaving, and we'll see, and Wade Wood as well. But yeah, absolutely. Barrett Carter is he's the center of this defense. And yeah, Antonio Williams, as you mentioned, absolutely. I mean, getting him back and healthy it's massive for this offense. All right, let's see. John Sarian said, saw a clip of Gramlich and McLean interview with Bud Elliott, and they all agreed that Miami on paper is the most talented ACC team. Agree. I wouldn't agree. No, I get why they say that, because Miami takes transfers and all that, but I do think that the makeup of both rosters, I think Miami has closed the gap for sure, and they've brought in especially on the lines of scrimmage. And I think that's where you saw them really, you know, give Clemson a lot of issues in the matchup last year. You know, offensive line, their offensive line did a really good job in that game of moving Clemson off the ball in the run game, and not putting a ton of pressure on Emory Williams, true freshman starter. So I thought they did a good job there. And then obviously their defensive line had a massive day, especially one defensive lineman in particular. But I think they've closed the gap there, but still have some questions about them from a skill talent standpoint. And I mean, bringing in Cam Ward is obviously massive. He's a super talented quarterback, but I'm not convinced that the overall makeup of the roster is the most talented in the ACC quite yet. Now they keep recruiting the way they do. Eventually, I do think they'll get there, but I'm not ready to say that they're the most talented in the ACC. But we'll see. Big Mick says it will not take Luke 3 years to correct technique. Clemson has the offensive line. They just need to correct technique. They will be ready game one. I hope so. I hope so. But I do think you're right. I don't think that the guys on the offensive line and the guys that you have on the roster, I don't think it's going to take a bunch to get them to play up to their ability. I mean, I think they've played a lot of football at this point. I think they just need a different philosophy. And I think that's what they needed. And bringing in Matt Luke is obviously a massive deal. But we'll see about being ready week one. That's kind of a different story, because it's not like you're starting out with Georgia Tech. You're starting with Georgia. No shade to Georgia Tech. But I'm with you that I do think we'll see a pretty early turnaround from the Clemson offensive line. But will it happen first game of the year? I'm not sure about that. We'll see. Todd is here. He says hello to everybody. One of our resident Gamecock fan. Don't really have any others. Good to see you, man. Let's see. Oh, I completely missed this. We had a super chat from Chase Thompson, $5. Thank you so much. Send it at 6:34. So sorry, my man. Obviously, I'm running this by myself, and it didn't pop up on my starred little section of comments like it normally does. That was strange. He says, I know it's way early, but 2026 with Tate, if he's ready at quarterback, and Luke having 2 years to fix the O-line, what do you think Clemson's offense looks like? That's a good question. I mean, expecting Tate to come in and start because if we're talking 2026, that will be Tate Reynolds' freshman year. Who is the quarterback then? I don't know. Is Vizina the quarterback? Is it Blake Hebert? I don't know. It depends. But so I'll kind of save the quarterback discussion. But from a Luke having 2 years to fix the offensive line, what do you think Clemson's offense will look like? I mean, you have to hope. I mean, you have to believe that you're going to have a significantly higher talent pool in your offensive line, in particular. I think I feel pretty good about that, and it depends on whether Matt Luke is here in 2026 as well. I think he will be, but you never know with coaches. But I do think you'll have a significantly higher talent pool to pull from as far as your offensive line is concerned. I mean, you do have a lot of young guys already on the roster that I think have a lot of potential. I mean, if you think about it, 2026, it'd be great if you have, guys like Harris Sewell and Ian Reed as, senior. I think they'd be seniors, I guess, at that point. You know, you have some true freshmen, talented true freshmen like Elijah Thurman. Um, you know, it would be nice to have a really experienced um, offensive line at that point from the young guys that you already have on the roster, and then of course you couple that with the guys you're bringing in this year's recruiting class and the next couple of ones. So you know, I think you'll be in a much better spot. I don't think there'll be much question there. I mean, and I don't think you're in a bad spot now. I think there's a lot of talent from an offensive line standpoint already on the roster. But I think as far as the number of top 50, you know top 25, top 30 plus guys that you have on the roster, I think you'll have a little bit more of that, and then you'll also have the top 200 type offensive linemen around them as well. Let's see. But thank you for the super chat, Chase. Sorry I missed it. I won't do that again. Tim asks, I have a question, please. How big of a drop off do you think Alabama has this year? Just wondering about your opinion, please. That's a really good question because I don't know. Alabama's been one of the teams I've just had the hardest time kind of coming to a decision on as far as how I feel about them, because it's hard to believe that Kalen DeBoer is going to have a bad team. Um, I don't expect a drop off. I mean, you bring back Jalen Milroe, which I mean he had his ups and downs last year, but having an experienced starter at quarterback is a big deal, and I think Kalen DeBoer can work with a player with his skill set. I don't know. There was a little bit of roster turnover, but they did a good job in the portal. They're recruiting really well right now, which obviously doesn't affect this year. Um, but I think there were enough pieces left in the cupboard that I don't think there's going to be a significant drop off. And potentially maybe they're even better if Kalen's scheme kind of fits more of what they like to be offensively. Um, I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know how to. I kind of don't know how to feel about them, but I do think I think they'll be good, and I think they'll be one of the contenders for the SEC. But I'm not sure how good. Like, are they national championship good, or are they going to be just kind of in the hunt? Jay asks if you had to put a percentage on it. Oh, I lost it. If you had to put a percentage on it, how much of Pee time will be at defensive end? I wish I had wish I could put like a snap count on it, but I'm not really good at gauging that. For a percentage standpoint, I would I would say maybe about 40%. I mean I might have said a little bit higher if you know, but I do have a feeling that Clemson is going to have some guys step up in that edge room to the point where you don't have Peter Woods like in there all the time. At defensive end, I think you'll have some snaps, not even just on third downs where he'll be inside. Um, but we'll see. Yeah, but I don't think he's going to be like in there like a full time necessarily, or even just standard down, all standard downs. I think he'll have some plays where he is uh, inside playing that three technique, or he's on the edge. But he'll play there a good bit. I think he'll play there a good bit, but I don't think it's going to be as much as maybe some people think. All right. Trying to get a question. Tick says Clemson has become 3-star U. Well, that's not true. I can't agree with that. I mean, you're still at a pretty high blue chip ratio. You're still getting 4 and 5-star kids. They just, I mean, every school is going to have 3 stars here or there, but I mean, you haven't become 3-star U. You're certainly one of the still recruiting at a top 10 to 15 level. I think getting the high level guys at the positions of need is where things you've kind of missed on. And obviously it's offensive line, jumps off. Hey, what's up, John? Shout out to John Diatomo. He says, hey to everyone. Good to see you, my man. One of our resident Michigan guys does great work over on the Michigan channel. Y'all make sure to check him out. He does a show every Thursday, and he does other shows as well around the Voice of College Football YouTube network. So y'all make sure to give him a shout out and tell him that Jordan sent you. All right. Ted S. He says, do you think the kicking situation will be improved this year? I think so. Yeah. I mean, I've expressed concern about it over the offseason just because, you haven't had a guy really separate himself yet. And you were kind of hoping with the struggles of Robert Gunn last year that, maybe Nolan Hooser comes in and kind of asserts himself. But, it's still unclear whether that's, Robert Gunn has gotten a lot better or, you just have two guys that are still really inconsistent. But I did see him. I did see him post some videos of him kicking. I thought he did look a lot better, obviously from a placement standpoint. First of all, I mean, I thought he looked a lot more in control. And I mean, he has an extremely talented leg. So just kind of getting things under control was kind of his problem last year mentally. So, I mean, it's easy to look good in, outside of the pads, but when you get on that field and you're kicking in a live situation, it's different. So ultimately that's something that we just won't know. I mean, you didn't go get a kicker. So, I mean, and I don't think there's any more former players that are just, that are enrolled in grad school that you can just throw onto the team for, their last year of eligibility. So you're going to have to roll with one of these two. I mean, you do have walk-on kickers, but I don't think they would be any better. So, I mean, those are your two scholarship guys. One of them has to figure it out and be that guy. And I think they will. So, but you got to see it first, obviously. See you guys talking about the 12-team playoff. Todd says it's great to have the playoffs at home for the 4 teams, worth the big money. Yeah, absolutely. I was one of the guys that was never really on board or super excited about expansion, but I'm glad that was one of the things that did end up getting included because it is cool to have. It's a cool concept to have home teams have a play. I mean, it's college football, and one of the most important things about college football, and one of the standout things that separate it from the pro game is the environments and the stadiums and the atmosphere, the traditions. It's you don't find anything else like it, and so being able to showcase that in the postseason is something that college football hasn't really been able to do now, and it has the opportunity to do that now. So which is another reason why it would be great. I'd be happy if it'd be great if Clemson, made the playoff. Now, obviously, it'd be nice to have, one of those buys. But even if you sneak in as an at-large or you get in as an at-large, but you get that playoff, if you're that 5 through 8 and you get that playoff game at home, that'd be really cool as well. Tig says Maffa will have a 1,500-yard season this year. That is ambitious. If Phil Maffa has a 1,500-yard season, I mean, yeah, you had a pretty good year. I think the offense will. You can say the offense had a pretty good year. I feel pretty confident in saying, but that's ambitious. I mean, Travis Etienne, he hit 1,600 in his sophomore and junior years. I don't think Phil Maffa has that kind of run in him. It would have to be. I mean, he would have to hit a lot of explosive plays in the run game. Absolutely, you'd have to be able to spring off a ton of runs. Because I think if he gets to 1,500 from a high volume of carries, then obviously you feel a little bit different about that, and obviously things probably didn't go as well for you offensively as you hoped. So I don't think 1,500 should be the hope for. I mean, that would be great, for a lot of reasons. But I think I've always felt more in that 1,000, 1,100, maybe 1,200. It's kind of where I think Will Shipley had 1,200 as a sophomore, or something like that, or just under 1,200. Like I think that's kind of where Phil Maffa will be. But I do think his chances of hitting 1,000 are obviously really high, especially since he really doesn't have he doesn't have a 1B running back. I mean, I think Keith Adams will get his run, and we'll see about how Jay Haynes factors in, but I think he is the guy. But if he hits 1,500, that'd be really cool. Jay says, I'm not judging our offensive line based on one game. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, and I will not judge the success of this team on the offensive line and the hire of Matt Luke based off of whether or not Clemson, just pushes around Georgia. Like that's obviously an unreasonable expectation with the talent they have up front. Like, I did think you match up better than against Georgia from an offensive line standpoint than you did in the last matchup, but I don't think that's going to be enough to say that if they don't push Georgia around and run that will and all that the Matt Luke hire was a failure and this offensive line sucks. Yeah, I mean, one game doesn't make a season, or it doesn't tell the story on anything, whether it's a team, a position group. Even if Georgia, walks in there and beats Clemson by 25, like I'm not going to say that, this offensive line isn't good, offense is bad, season is a wash. I mean, didn't Georgia and Oregon open up the season a couple of years ago, and Georgia beat them like 49-7? It was 49-3 or something like that. It was something crazy like that, and Oregon ended up being a double-digit win team. Like you're playing Georgia. I mean, they're going to be a top. They're either going to be the number one team or number two, more than likely in the country when you play them. That's just the reality. And I don't think you're going to get beat 49-3. That's for sure. I don't think it's going to be. I think you're going to be a lot more competitive than that. John says, I'll judge the offensive line in game one. Won't be hypercritical even if it's a loss, but if they show improvement and especially sync to Riley's game strategy, they'll get my kudos. Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, it really is about the process for sure. And whether or not they're doing the right things in that game. Like sometimes, like if you lose a rep because Georgia, the guys just flat out better. I mean, okay, that's you live with that, but if you're losing reps because of bad hand placement, you're losing reps because you're jumping, you're jumping early, getting false starts, you're not playing with proper technique or leverage, like stuff like that. Then that's kind of a concern. But if you're losing a rep because you lost a rep, like okay, and that's just going to happen. That's football, and that's especially in the trenches. That's you're going to get beat sometimes. But it really is about if they are doing the right things. Jeremiah says the offense we ran under Elliott and Scott and Morris, it really matters not good offensive line play with the way they tempo and ran motions. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, tempo was a big thing. They did a lot. What Clemson did really well was recruit guys on the offensive line that could get out and run. They weren't overly physical, like they weren't big players, but they were athletic. They could get out and pull. They could get out and block on the edge on screens, and kind of get and also get to the second level quickly. Like that was kind of the thing. It was a very finesse type of offensive line. Like they were not a overly physical, just move like full of a bunch of movers. You had guys here or there, but you were not built to overwhelm a team physically from an offensive line standpoint. And they did a good job of scheming to that. It was a very finesse style of offense, but it worked. I mean, it helped you when you have a quarterback. I mean, when you have the Taj Boyds and Sean Watson and Trevor Lawrence's, I mean, that certainly helps. And you also have, the receivers, that can get open quickly. That's kind of the recipe for success. And you also had, you had really good running back play at multiple points. It was very complete offense. And so, you didn't need the offensive line that was going to just bully teams for 4 quarters, because teams were scared of trying to, teams that tried to overwhelm you from an offensive line, from a numbers and offensive line standpoint, Clemson would make you pay. It's like, okay, you want to load the box? Okay, just throw a screen over to Artavis Scott or Sammy Watkins or name your Clemson receiver, Amari Rogers. You're gonna leave your corners on an island to send more guys. Okay, jump ball to T. Higgins, jump ball to Mike Williams. Nuke Hopkins. Like there were so many options, and so that's one of the things that I think Clemson is getting its way back to that if you have the wide receiver play that I think you do. But also, I think you have, the makeup of your offensive line is closer to that of you have guys that can move guys off of the ball. You have some really physical players on your offensive line. I mean, Walker Parks he's psychotic, honestly. I mean, a healthy Walker Parks he's a mover, man. Blake Miller in the run game, especially, he's a mover. Marcus Tate, he can move guys off the ball. You have guys that can do that, and you're seeing what Clemson is trying to shift to from a recruiting standpoint to fit more of that mold as well. So, I mean, I think eventually you'll get to that point where you have the offensive line to be more of a line of scrimmage team, because you've been that for so long on the defensive side of the ball, but you never did it for the offensive because you didn't really have to. But now you have to. All right. Intelligent Savage says, I wish there was a clear home run hitter coming in behind Phil Maffa that I could feel better about that change of pace guy. Question, have we taken a step backwards with that? How do you feel about that? Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there isn't an obvious guy there. I mean, Keith Adams does a lot of the same things. He's a similar style runner to Phil Maffa. I think Phil is certainly faster and has a little bit better vision, but Keith Adams is a very physical. He's a similar kind of physical, just kind of run at you. He seeks contact type of running back. You don't really have a guy that obvious guy that's going to, just at any moment is just one cut and break one for 50 yards for a touchdown. So, I mean, I think finding that, I think Jay Haynes is a guy that I think can eventually be that. He dealt with injury at times last year, but I do think he has a different level of burst than the rest of the guys in the running back room. So I think if it is going to be anybody this year, I think it has to be Jay Haynes from a home run hitter standpoint, 'cause, I mean, I think Phil Maffa can do that to some degree. I mean, obviously he had some pretty explosive runs. He's had explosive runs throughout his career, but he's not, he's not a burner, and he's just not gonna. You don't feel like, oh man, like at any moment he's just gonna take one to the house. If Jay Haynes can get to that point, because I do think he has that level of speed, then then you have something cooking. But you don't necessarily have to have that. But it would obviously add another dimension to this offense. It would make things more difficult for teams to game plan for it. Tig says, so is Luke calling the plays or Garrett Riley? I know a lot of fans say Dabo is. It's Garrett Riley. Garrett Riley has always been calling the plays. He called the plays last year. Dabo doesn't call the offense. That's something that has kind of been perpetuated a lot, but that's just not true. He doesn't call plays. He doesn't meddle with the offense. Like the calls that Clemson made last year were Garrett's. And I think, and I've said it, before. I mean, I don't think that you had the personnel, and obviously you didn't have the quarterback play necessary to do a lot of what you wanted to do last year. And injuries up front on the offensive line didn't help. Made you had to switch some things up from a blocking scheme standpoint. But none of that was Dabo influence. That was Garrett Riley it's his offense. He is the guy that is steering the direction of this ship as far as Clemson, not just from a on the field, and week to week game planning standpoint and play calling standpoint, but from a recruiting standpoint as well, particularly quarterbacks. Tate Reynolds, obviously you got him in the 2026 class. He committed this past Sunday. That's the guy that Garrett Riley wanted, and the staff was on board. That's the guy and so I think people just have this idea that Dabo is meddling and everything, and he's just a control freak. When that's not the case. He absolutely, he has his quirks and he has his way of doing things, but he does let his coordinators and his coaches coach. That's never been. I've never heard that, just ever since he's been the head coach, I've never heard him not letting his position, not just his position coaches, but his coordinators coach. That's never been a thing with him. Will says, are you feeling better about Clemson this year than last year? I mean, I think so. Yeah, I did feel good about this team last year, so it probably isn't worth much mentioning. But I do think, especially in comparison to where this team was last year, I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you bring, especially from an offensive standpoint. I mean, I think the ingredients are there now, to where, this offense should be pretty good if you get, just a sizable step up from Cade from a quarterback play standpoint. I think everything else will come together. I do think the offensive line will figure it out. And I think the receivers and tight ends are in the best place they've been in a really long time. So you're going to have weapons and guys to throw to. And I think Cade will have time to get them the ball. And you bring back an experienced and senior Phil Maffa to kind of lead your running back room and kind of be that guy. But, it really is about Cade and his development from year one starting to year two. And right now, I believe in that progression being enough to where you have a legitimate, capable offense. Dylan says, Jordan is such a cutie patootie. Well, thank you, Dylan. Good to see you, my man. Chase says, how do you feel now that Bryce Davis has a crystal ball to Clemson? Yeah, I mentioned him a little bit earlier. I mean, I think Clemson is in a really good spot, as his commitment date Near's closer. He is set to announce July 20th. For those unaware, the top 50 defensive end from Greensboro, North Carolina, Grimsley High School. And if you follow recruiting, you probably know that high school because Clemson has certainly, you know, tried to get guys there from there in the past and have it at times. And obviously there's one name in particular that, you know, that we all think of, but kind of landing him would be massive. It would give you another top 50 player in your recruiting class and put a bow on that defensive line class. But yeah, I think Clemson's in a really good spot. He hasn't made a decision yet, but the way things are trending with Georgia's class, I don't think ultimately he Duke is, his ties to Duke are going to be enough for them to win that recruitment. And I think that leaves Clemson in the best spot. I know South Carolina is also in there. I don't think they're, legitimately an option. I think so. I think that leaves Clemson in the best position as it stands right now. But things change. We know how recruiting goes. Especially, I know a lot of people are kind of are pretty skeptical when Clemson gets a crystal ball for anybody after how last month went. Tig says, asks who in the wide receiver group will go 700 yards in the season. That's a good question. I'm going to go Antonio Williams. I think Antonio Williams will be my first pick. I think he is the most versatile in the room, and they're going to play him a lot. And he just, he can act as a safety blanket, and he can act as a playmaker downfield. Great route runner, one of the most reliable hands on the team. I think he's my number one choice for 700 yards plus. Yeah, Antonio Williams. I want to believe that one of the true freshmen gets it. I think one of the true. I don't think both, but I'm going to go with TJ Moore, but I'm not ready to commit to that. But I do think one of the freshmen will be one of your 700 yarders. Do I want to go? Will Clemson have 2 or 3? I guess is the question. Because I do think you'll have 2. I don't know if it'll be a receiver. I'll go with Jake Brenningstool. I'm going to buy into. He has a big season. I think the ceiling is extremely high for him. I know you said in the wide receiver group, so I guess that I already answered your question. But if I had to pick another 700-yard receiver, just receiver in general, I would go with Jake Brenningstool. All right, let me see. Okay. I was checking to see if Tiger Paul Craven would drop in. It was dropped, but I think that his softball game is still going on. Charles asked, so is Bryce Davis basically a lock to commit to Clemson since the crystal ball? No, I don't know. Well, I never used the word lock in anyway, but no, I don't label anybody a lock, and I don't think that the decision it even a week out has been completely rendered yet. So I don't want to say a lock, but I don't typically use the word lock anyway. Jeremiah's Payne says, I think Dabo stopped calling plays after 19 now. Is he still involved? Of course, he is the head coach. He's not involved. So Dabo certainly is, he doesn't just, let his coaches, do everything. And he doesn't have any sort of say in how things go. But, No, Dabo from a individual play, like he doesn't. No, he doesn't call play. Like he has like whether it's a maybe it's a special teams play like a fake or something like that. Like yeah, he'll jump in and make decisions on certain plays. Because ultimately he's the it goes through him and he knows what they're going to do. And if he wants to do something, do something different to shake it up, I mean, that's where he'll jump in. But I mean, Dabo is not the one just sitting there, every individual play call and saying, all right, this is what we're gonna run here, and this is what we're gonna run here. I mean, that's just not the case. And obviously, they go through the game plan with him, during the week, but he's not the one. Like he's not the one steering the ship there. Like he's just it comes to me and I sign, we decide that's what we're going to do. But that's the reality. It's not a Dabo is just is meddling with the play calling and meddling with the game plan and telling all those coaches this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to do. So I'd like to squash that whenever I get the opportunity, because it's not true, because it distracts from when things aren't going well, it distracts from addressing the real issues. John says Dabo is a control freak about his vision and his philosophy. Absolutely, which is expected. No way he's involved in everything down to each play call, like some keep saying for some weird reason. Yeah, I mean, Dabo is in control of the direction of the offense to the degree that he hired Garrett Riley, because Garrett Riley was the direction that he wanted the offense to go. Like that's so yeah. I mean, that's like you said, that's every head coach. They decide who they want. They find guys that do what you want them to do. That do what you want them to do, but it's not because you're telling them to do it. It's because that's something that they already do, and it fits. And you see eye to eye on what you think should be done. And so that's what Dabo did. He brought in Garrett Riley because he felt like that was the direction he wanted to go for this offense. But he didn't bring in Garrett Riley just to handcuff him and tell him, we're going to run the same stuff we did last year, and we're going to run the same stuff we ran under Chad Morris and Tony Elliott and Jeff Scott. Like that's not what happened. No national championship head coach is doing that, unless you're Jimbo Fisher, which obviously we see how that worked out. Jay says, do you think Thomas Austin was doing a lot of the shuffling on the offensive line? And do you think Luke will do the same? I think there was a degree of last year of just there was shuffling, but it felt like it was kind of out of necessity because you just weren't getting the level of play that you needed to. And you just guys were not you. And the problem is week to week, guys weren't being consistent. Like, because, at different points last year, you throw in one guy and he plays pretty well one week, and then the next week he's unplayable. When Walker Park, like for example, when Walker Parks went down, I mean, you kind of went through that revolving door. You had Mitchell Mays thrown out there and Trent Howard and Harris Sewell at times, and you never really got consistent play from week to week from really any of them. So it was like, okay, you felt like you found the answer one week, and then the next week they're getting ragdolled by Wake Forest 3-man front, and you're just like, okay, well now what do I do? I mean, I kind of, I felt for Thomas Austin at times last year, but also, it's your job to have these guys ready, and especially these guys that have been in the program for multiple years are coming in and just giving you bad football. Like that's concerning. Left tackle is another example. 1 week Tristan Lay was the guy, and he was playing well, and the next week is like he it's not playing well, you got to throw in Colin Sadler, and then he plays well, and but then you're like, okay, maybe Colin Sadler's the guy, and then you give him the majority of the snaps, and then he doesn't play well, and so the consistency wasn't there, obviously. So I mean, I don't think Matt Luke will do the same. I think I mean the goal is certainly to settle on your five, and having four of your five guys coming back is a big deal, and obviously will go a long way towards settling on a five. But I don't expect them to. I don't necessarily expect to do a lot of shuffling, throughout the season, because obviously if you're doing that, then things aren't going very well. But we'll see. We'll see how things happen early in the season. Georgia will certainly tell us a lot, but the App State, I think, will be kind of all right. Are we getting what we need to out of these guys, or do we need to switch some things up? Jeremiah says, I think Luke is going to have a true five, and you still got Sadler and Sewell who can go as well. Absolutely. And well, hey, maybe Sewell especially ends up being one of those five. You still have that ongoing battle with him and Ryan Linthicum for center. Maybe it's him, and maybe he is the five, and then you have Ryan Linthicum as a backup. We'll see kind of how that plays out in the fall. But ideally, if you can have Tristan Lay be that 5-star, and then you have Marcus Tate and whoever it is at center, and then Walker Parks and Blake Miller, and you have that starting group, throughout at least most of the year, because injuries do happen, but hopefully the injury fairies like smile on you, and you get more continuity from that standpoint week to week. Then we could be talking about this group a lot differently than we have been. All right, I think this is going to be the last couple ones. I think I've actually caught up to the chat, so that's good. Chase says, what are the chances the all-in cookout gets a commit or two? I think there's a really high chance they get at least one commit. Two, we'll see as we get closer to the date who ends up being there, and there are probably maybe, and there could be some names that we haven't talked about that end up added to the list. I mean, you'll have the list of commitments there, and potentially a new one or two that will commit before the cookout. So, but I do think the chances are really high that you get at least one out of that. Tiggs asks, what receiver do you think will step up and become take the top off a defense player? I mean, I think take the top off, like who has that potential, that true number one potential. I already mentioned TJ Moore. I mean, we'll have to see how he comes in fall camp, because I don't want to get ahead of my skis, but I do think he is very college ready, and I do think he's ready to be in this in this rotation right away. So I think he does give you a lot from a downfield playability standpoint. But as far as the guys already on the roster, I mean, I already mentioned Antonio Williams. I think he can take the top off of a defense. Tyler Brown did it multiple times last year. If you can get Adam Randall, he's the biggest, we talked about him, but Adam Randall is the biggest wild card in this entire room. If Adam Randall becomes the Adam Randall that you thought you were getting, that really changes everything, because now everything opens up, and it takes pressure off of the true freshmen, Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore, to kind of step in and be that on the outside. It opens things up for it opens things up for Antonio Williams, Tyler Brown, Troy Stellato. Cole Turner is a guy that I think is going to play, and I think has kind of gotten forgotten about because of injuries. But when he did play, as a true freshman, he made plays downfield, and I think as a third year player and him kind of settling in and into the receiver position because it was new to him when he got to Clemson. Like he's a guy that can give you something down the field. He's one of the fastest. I think he is the fastest player on the team. Um, so I mean, you have a lot of options. I don't know if in that receiver room that can get downfield, that have that speed. And so I really do like this. I don't know if there's like one that I would pick, but I think you have a lot of options there. And Go Tigers, yeah, he mentions TJ Moore, Tyler Brown, Cole Turner. Yeah, I mean, I think those are some really obvious ones. They can run. TJ Moore obviously gives you the most from a physicality standpoint, but he has verified speed now. And really big play ability. And then Tyler Brown showed it a bunch last year. You can do a ton with him, and you already and Cole Turner. So yeah, absolutely, I like those three a lot. He also says Lay played way better down the back half of the season than the first half. And I agree. And I thought he did. Watching him, I thought he figured some things out. It's why you know I think he'll ultimately be the guy at left tackle this year. And under Matt Luke's coaching, does he finally, raise up to that 5-star ability and that 5-star billing that he had coming out of high school? Because he was, not all 5 stars are created equal. He was a guy that came in and had a lot of development to do from, his body. He had to get stronger. He had to get bigger. And I think it wasn't an overnight process. It took a couple of years, and I think this past season he got to where he needed to be, and now it's about learning to play within that frame and that size. And so he got a year to do that and another off season. I mean, I really do think that Tristan Lay has a really high potential to have a big year this year and solidify himself as a future, NFL player. So we'll see. But I tend to agree. I think he does figure it out. Go Tigers mentions wide receiver Dylan Alfred and linebacker Logan Anderson. In reference to all-in cookout and 2 commits that you could have pretty soon in that time frame. Yeah, absolutely. Tim says, I would like to just like to say great show. Thank you so much, Timothy. Greatly appreciate it. And I've seen you a good bit, at multiple points. So feel free to stick around. We'd love to have different fan bases, and hey, we might be Big 12 brothers pretty soon. Who knows? So, feel free to stick around, and thank you for tuning in. Will asks, will Antonio Williams have higher or lower than 800 yards? That's a good question. I'm going to go higher. I think he'll get to 800. I think he can get to 800. But not by much, because I don't expect anybody to get to 1,000, because I think there's just there's too much in the room at this point there's not enough snaps to go around. But I think he can get there. Let's see. He would have to 800 yards, 12 games, just through a 12-game season. He would need about 60 yards a game, and if you make it to the ACC championship, and I do think if you make the playoff, I mean, even just the postseason, I think that's a realistic possibility. I think Antonio Williams at 60 yards a game, I think that's doable. And that's just with That's just with a 12 game sample size. But he has to stay healthy, obviously. Jeremiah Payne says, besides experience, why has Tyler Grisham struggled? Well, I mean, he hasn't had guys his guys healthy. You know, I think that's one of the things that hindered a lot of kind of his ability to do his job was he just guys weren't available at multiple points. Obviously the 2021 season was a disaster from a wide receiver injury standpoint, and the makeup of that room wasn't great either. I mean, your best receiver was Justin Ross, a year off from football, and and he was coming off of surgery and he was playing with a broken foot. Like it's not ideal. 2022, you get some guys to step up. Antonio Williams comes in as a true freshman. That is one of your guys. Obviously he had a really strong freshman year, but then Bo Collins couldn't stay healthy, and Adam Randall tore his ACL before the year, and you didn't have. I mean, you didn't have a lot of your guys to work with. Joseph Ngata had a fine final year, but I mean, that's not a guy you recruited, and ultimately he struggled with injuries, throughout his career as well. 2023, excuse me, and I didn't even mention Troy Stellato being basically unavailable for the first 2 years of his career. But 2023, you think you guys have it kind of figured out a little bit. Bo Collins can't stay healthy. Antonio Williams can't stay healthy. Tyler Brown, one of your guys, comes in as a true freshman, has a big year. But again, Adam Randall, coming off of a torn ACL, took him a time to really kind of settle in, and he just we'll see what happens this year. But it didn't click for him last year. And Troy Stellato, you finally get him back, and he gives you a boost at times, but injuries again at different points. So I mean, I don't want to completely remove personal responsibility from Tyler Grisham for the struggles at receiver, because that there have been things over the years, regardless of health, that just weren't up to snuff. Obviously, the blocking had fallen off a significant bit, and that has to be corrected. Guys not getting as much separation in their routes. That's that falls on the receivers coach as well. So I don't want to remove responsibility from Tyler Grisham, but I do think there were a lot of things over the past 3 seasons that have, from a health standpoint, that hindered his ability to get the most out of his room. But I think this year obviously is big for him. And if guys stay healthy and you're still not getting the production you need, we need to have some conversations. But I think he's done a good job of putting this room, of kind of flipping the room and getting it back to where, closer to where it needs to be. But we have to see it on the field. Hey, Tiger Paw Craven is here. He says, great show. Thank you for holding it down. Yeah, man, absolutely. And sorry you weren't able to make it out. I hope y'all won. Weather sucks, but thank you for showing up, man. But it's definitely not the same without you. So hopefully next time we'll have our regular show. But I definitely wanted to save all of our planned stuff for when we're both together. So you take care, buddy. All right. Oh, you tried to get in, but the link wouldn't work. Well, hold on a second. Oh. didn't even see this. My bad. Okay, let me see if I can. Let's see if we can get you in for a couple of minutes before I end the show. I have to do it the hard way. Come on. I'm trying to scan it with my phone so it'll. Okay. All right. Well, we'll try it again, some other time. But yeah, I'm sorry about that, man. Uh, all right, we'll make this the last one. Oh well. He has a question for Tiger Paw Craven. He says, "Who do you think is the take the top off the defense player in 2024?" So, Tiger Paw Craven, you can answer in the comments. I gave my take, and he also asks, "Would you rather have 4 wide receivers at 400 yards or one at 900?" Well, I mean, I certainly would have. I mean, if you're telling me that one has 900 and everybody else has like one, your next closest has like 200 or 100, then yeah, I'd certainly rather have the first option. Um, yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, I think you'd certainly rather have four with 400. All right. Oh, and Go Tiger says injuries has hurt the wide receiver room and hurt Grisham's coaching. They need to be healthy to see how they are developing, and he is recruiting well the last 3 years. Yeah, I mean, is your best receivers, every season have been the guys he recruited. Um, I mean, I think that counts for something. It just, and it just sucks that he hasn't had the continuity from year to year where, guys, they have their strong year and then they build on it. Bo Collins had a strong freshman year, wasn't able to build on it because of injuries. Antonio Williams had a strong freshman year, didn't really get a chance to build on it because of injuries. Tyler Brown, we will see. And then you have the guys that just haven't been able to get it together from a health perspective, really at all. Adam Randall and Troy Stellato especially. But when they've played, especially Troy Stellato, when he got in, you're like, oh, okay, wow, he's a great. I mean, he's a great safety blanket, really strong hands. Made some really tough catches for you this past year, and okay, well, you kind of see the vision. So if guys can just stay on the field, then we'll have a chance to properly judge whether Tyler Grisham is able to develop at the level that you need him to. All right, I think that's going to do it for tonight, guys. I can't believe I yapped for 2 hours by myself, so I'm a little proud of myself and also a little scared. But thank you guys for tuning in. Obviously this wasn't a normal show. Would have liked to have had my co-host with me, but all in all, still just really grateful each and every week to have you guys tune in and listen to what we have to say. And it really is a blessing. So before you leave, once again, last reminder, please hit that like button, subscribe. If you are a newcomer, we had certainly a few new people in here, so please give the like button give the like button a hit and the subscribe button a hit, and also check out the links in the description. There's a link to the Mark Rogers Patreon, the Amazon link where you can shop, and the Voice of College Football gets a little kickback, and other links as well for merchandise and the like. So feel free to check those out as well, because those also help the channel. But unfortunately, our time has come to an end. We will be here next week, hopefully a normal show with no weather to mess everything up. And same time, Friday, 5:30 p.m. Hopefully, I will not be, stuck playing the college football game, because I'm really excited for that. I don't know if I'll be getting much done during the week, but I will be able to hop on with you guys. So, once again, thank you for tuning in. I am your host, as always, Jordan Bowman, and we will see you guys next week. Go Tigers.